Hi, this is Chuck Oliver. Welcome to this week's Hidden Wealth Solution Review. Well, do you want to avoid the coming stealth taxes? There was an article out in Forbes this week, which was very concerning, titled, "Will Congress Repeal the Roth IRA Benefits?" This is by Bob Carlson. And I'm going to hit a couple of the high points here, but folks, get ready because everything's changing. And the question, I think, was very appropriate when I was listening to Ron Beck towards the end of this week was, have you had enough? Have you had enough of all these changes? The Secure Act 2.0. And of course, he was talking about, have you had enough with, just a sad day, right? With the world changing so drastically, we've now indicted a former president of the United States. So things are changing and they're changing rapidly. But I want to teach you what you can do to avoid these unnecessary taxes. In other words, steps that you can take to actually have an impact on protecting what you've worked so hard to have, right? Imagine more financial success, less stress, less worry, less taxation, the ability to stay ahead of inflation, and to avoid market deterioration. And boy, I've got a lot to unpack here in a quick few minutes here on this update. So the Roth IRA came into effect in 1997. And when we talk about stealth taxes, I'll make this somewhat simple to think about. Stealth taxes would include things that trigger taxing your Social Security benefits, your Medicare premiums, and what we call the Obamacare tax, or the 3.8% net investment income tax. Now, think about this. The main risk is this. When we work hard, and I'll teach you this Tuesday at retirementprotected.com, that's retirementprotected.com. In other words, how do you do two things? How do you untax the money that you have and work so hard for that's not been taxed? And then where do you put this tax savings and or redirecting, maybe for those of you that are still saving towards retirement, or you need a safe place to park your capital, right? So that the banks can't flush it, right? The Fed can't basically wash it away with inflation, and Uncle Sam can't rob it of taxation. Well, I'm going to talk to you about the Roth alternatives. So we've got one Roth structure that is under attack because Congress and the federal government and the IRS controls that. So one of the things, if you remember not so long ago, is you couldn't do a Roth conversion if your income was too high. Just like today, you can't do a Roth contribution if your income's too high. Well, that was lifted because, basically Congress said, you know what, we need money. We need a lot of money. And back then, which they lifted this in 2010 under the Obama administration, our deficit wasn't anywhere near the 31.5 trillion that we have today. You've got the Congressional Budget Office that said back then it would take an approximate average 60% federal tax rate just to try to keep from falling off a cliff with our national deficit. Well, folks, look where our deficit is now, and look who we have in office that's proposing now 4.7 trillion of additional taxes over the next 10 years. So where are they going to get this? Well, let's wake up and smell the coffee here, folks. We know where they're going to get it. It's from the makers, they being the takers, and I want to teach you how you can avoid that happening. Now, what's this stealth tax? Well, it used to be that you didn't have to count tax-free bond interest towards whether that goes against counting the ability to tax our Social Security benefits, our Medicare premiums, or trigger other taxes. Well, folks, they do. So a lot of people now are contemplating that even though we can get our money untaxed and put it in these Roth IRAs, when this money comes out tax-free, they still need it to trigger taxes somewhere else. And I'll give you a great example. I was talking with Mike and Tina that we work with this week from the great state of Colorado. And I'll give you kind of the high points. He says, look, I'm concerned of all the taxes we're going to be paying over these coming years. And he was socking away money in like the maximum to his retirement account because he's still working. He actually is self-employed. He knows he's actually the perfect Biden bullseye tax target because he and his wife make over that $400,000 or right at that $400,000 threshold that's being targeted for higher taxes. And he said, look, my goal is to reduce my taxes. I don't want to retire and capture this. I don't want to retire and reduce my lifestyle. We like going out to dinner, right? We like to travel. And I want to make sure, right, that we've got this right. Well, folks, the time to get this right is now. We taught him how to use one strategy that allows him to use a deduction to not only stop putting away money pre-tax. Pre-tax dollars, it means increased tax dollars. The longer you defer out taxes, the more taxes you're going to pay. So he learned how to use the Roth alternative for the money he's still saving, so it can be tax-free from that day forward. But he also used one strategy that allows up to a 100% tax deduction. Typically, it averages in the first year about 80%. that allows us to show him in the tax code through our tax team how to Roth convert without paying the conversion tax. He's using a deduction to move his IRAs to Roth IRA, but he's also able to move that in an environment that has no downside risk, only unlimited upside. It's not some traditional annuity where you have these caps, right? But also in the safest asset class that's never failed financially, being legal reserve insurance companies, because many people are distraught over Wall Street, right, going all over the place because of all this Fed tightening, and it's ruining the economy. And as I talked about last week, right, don't let the Fed, wreck your retirement. Well, folks, it's wrecking a number of people's retirement. But look at what's happening. So people are afraid of the market, so they're going to cash. Now they're afraid of cash because of what banks are doing. And all along, people could have the best of both worlds where they have access to their cash, but they don't have exposure to the market, and they don't have limits to what they can make, and you can get that money tax-free. Well, I'll finish by saying this. Stansberry, many of you subscribe to. I'm an Alliance member. I really appreciate their writings. He said, they said the Fed's license to kill the economy, right? And I think they put it properly when they said, you're a kite dancing in a hurricane, Mr. Powell, right? Our Fed chairman. If you tighten too much, you're going to wreck the economy, which is happening. If you tighten too little, inflation's not going to go away. The reality is this: an economy shaken, a recession not stirred, as it goes on to say. But the bottom line is this: the Powell and the Fed already know they've wounded the economy. How much more are they going to wound the economy? And lastly, Rich Dad Poor Dad, one of my favorite authors, Robert Kiyosaki, he basically said there's a market crash of 1 quadrillion coming if the Fed keeps raising rates. In case you wonder what a quadrillion is, it's 1,000 trillion. Now, that may seem outlandish to you, but folks, this is how bad this has trickle-down economics. When the banks are now tightening, right, that's going to slow economic growth because a high percentage of businesses, especially small businesses that run this country, borrow money, especially to get through pandemics, et cetera, and they're running on fumes, especially with all this crazy high inflation, cost of goods, supply chain breakdown, et cetera. So they're laying people off. Thousands of fewer people are paying into tax rolls. They're not expanding. They're not growing. Their companies aren't as profitable. And what's that mean to where we're investing our money for our own retirement? It's critical, folks. So you're seeing now rising rates, obviously crippling people. People are actually charging their rent and groceries to credit cards today. But worse than that, now that they've put so much pressure on making toxic assets now in these banks, now that we have no longer zero interest rates, now banks are failing. And now all banks are, and their restrictions are tightening, right, with these forced restrictions, and they're now not lending, which now that means obviously businesses are going to suffer. Folks, protect yourself. Don't let these stealth taxes catch up with you. While you're focused on taxes, while we're in the heart of this tax season, get ahead of this. Don't let the Fed ruin your retirement. Don't let banks failing wreck your retirement, and learn where you can be safe. Go to retirementprotected.com. That's retirementprotected.com, and learn how to remove your serious retirement savings from stealth taxes and remove your income and assets from the federal tax system. Retirementprotected.com, retirementprotected.com.